أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. All praises to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and may peace and blessings be upon his final messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Whomsoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides, none can misguide, and whomsoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala misguides, none can guide. It's narrated in Sahih Bukhari that by Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala an, he says, An Abi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam قال سبعة يذلهم الله في ذله يوم لا ذل إلا ذله. That 7 will be under the shade, in his shade, when there is no shade except his shade. And as the brother mentioned, there are 7 categories of people are mentioned. And the one that I, inshallah, will be discussing a little bit about today will be where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Shabun nasha'i fi ibadati rabbih," that the youth who grew up in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So first of all, this shade of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we might sometimes quote, what is this shade? What is this slight covering? This light darkness, that's all a shade is. What could be so special? What could be so important about having this shade? Well, we know that even in a normal temperatures, or like today, slightly hot, when we try to go outside, we can feel the sun rays on our face, and we think to ourselves, if only there was some shade. Or where we look on the street where there is some shade, we cross over to step in that shade. And we get comfort from that. We get protection from that shade. And indeed, on the day of resurrection, the shade of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be most important to anyone who may get its blessings. Because on that day, it's been reported in Sahih Muslim that the sun itself will be so close to the people, only a mile away, that the people will begin to become submerged in their own sweat, in their own perspiration, according to their deeds. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned that for some people the sweat will be up to their ankles. For some, it will be up to their knees. And for some, it will be up to their waist. And for some, they will have a bridle of perspiration all the way up to their necks. So this is the sweat and the heat that the people will face on this day, on the day of resurrection. And on that day, we won't be able to look around for a building or for a tree to try and find some shade. We won't be able to look around, in some nice covered area, or be able to get into our AC cars. The only comfort on that day will be the shade of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so for this reason, these categories of people have been mentioned, and we ourselves, inshallah, we should try to take lesson from that, and to try and ensure that we ourselves fall into one of those categories. So the youth who grew up in the worship of Allah. Well, first of all, let's have a look at youth in general. Why youth? Why are youth mentioned? Why aren't more mature people mentioned? Why aren't older people mentioned? Why youth? What's special about being youthful? Well, if we look at youth in general, we can see that youth have a lot of energy. They have a lot of time. They're not occupied with responsibilities of children or of a wife. They have ambition. They have a vision maybe for something they want to achieve in life. They often want to see something different to what's already around them. They like to change things. But of course, they also like to experiment. They like to try something different. They are curious. But I work as a teacher in a secondary school. And often when we talk about the young people there, we talk about mainly their potential. So youth have a lot of potential. Youth can achieve something great if they have the right aspirations, the right ambitions. And it's this potential that I think is important for the youth and for ourselves, as many of us here. We're not past the post as it is. We've still got, inshallah, some time on our hands, Allah willing. So we ourselves need to use the time, need to use the energy, need to use our efforts that we have available in order to achieve something of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to achieve. However, if we look at the youth in Western societies, if we look at the youth in un-Islamic societies, we can see often that this energy, this time, is wasted. And it's used up in many ways that we would find very disagreeable. I'm sure we're all very much aware of the ongoing knife crime, the fighting between young people with one another. Just recently we heard a young man, Sufyan Balamoudin, probably a Muslim. He got stabbed at Victoria Station. So far 19 people, so far they say, have been arrested in connection with his murder. 19 teenagers this is. And we're all aware that his murder, his killing, and all these other young people who have died, it would have been over the most pathetic of reasons. I heard in one of these cases somebody got stabbed and I think got killed because they were owed £10. It was over £10 that they killed this other person. We also find the youth, of course, they engage in the drinking and the drugs, trying to get high, trying to get this special experience. I was reading about their new use of alcohol, that it's not enough of a high just to get drunk. So what they do now is they take vodka, and where do they put it? They put it in the eye. They take a shot in the eye. You know why they do that? Because it's supposed to get them high quick. You're supposed to get them drunk even quicker, because they get straight into their brains. Of course, many of them end up screaming when the vodka starts burning their eyes, and then they realize, okay, maybe I shouldn't have done that. But this is youth, young people, that's what they do. They try something new, try something different. Unfortunately, we also see in many cases relationships between boys and girls without any responsibility, and we've heard many a time about children, and even the recent Prime Minister David Cameron, he said it's a worrying trend that children are having children. It's worrying because who's going to take responsibility? No one. That's the problem. That no one's going to take responsibility for this young child who's going to be coming into this world. But of course, this is what the young people in the West are told. That enjoy yourselves, experiment, try things out at least once, have a go, live life to the max. I remember when I was in school a long time ago, not as a teacher, but when I was a student in the secondary school, I remember an assembly. And this guy, the guy who gave this assembly, he was one of those teachers who was a bit, hyperactive. He wasn't just into his just normal routine teaching. He wants all the young people to get involved, to be energetic, to do things. So he gave this assembly, and I remember to this day,